Hello, Mr. Hansen. If you can just unmute your mic so I can test your... Hello, how are you? We cannot hear you. You are unmuted. Mr. Hansen, if you can check your mic, we're going to have to start the briefing on this side. Maybe check your settings, audio settings. And for now, I will mute you and switch off your camera for the moment. Thank you. And if it doesn't work, perhaps try to connect via phone, although it would be great to have you actually via desktop. Thank you.
Good morning, colleagues here in Geneva and online. Today is the 7th of February. We are starting now the press briefing of the Information Service of the United Nations. We have many colleagues here in the room and online to speak about the terrible tragedy that has struck Turkey and Syria in the last hours. We've all seen the terrible images that are coming from there. And as the Secretary General said yesterday, our hearts go out to the people of Turkey and Syria in this hour of tragedy. He has sent his deepest condolences to the families of the victims and wished a speedy recovery to the injured. Above all, he said the United Nations is fully committed to supporting the response to this terrible tragedy. And today we have many colleagues online to tell you more about the United Nations operations at the moment, and also from the Red Cross International Federation. So as there are many colleagues, we'll do it a little bit one after the other, and then I give everybody the possibility to ask a question. But I'd like to hear first from our colleagues so that we have a complete picture of the activities that we are running in these areas. Just to say that these first hours, has been underlined already, are the time for the assessment of the situation. And in that sense, I would like to start to give the floor to Jens Lerche for OCHA to give us a brief overview of the situation, and then we will go to each and every colleague. Thank you. Jens.
Thank you, Alessandra, and good morning, everyone. Yes, I will be brief because we have so many colleagues calling in from the field, and I want to give them as much time as possible. But just to put out there the numbers that we are operating with today, those are the sad results of this colossal earthquakes, as a matter of fact, that happened, and way over 200 aftershocks. So we are certainly not out of the woods. We are at the very beginning of this. So this morning, the government of Turkey has confirmed at least 3,381 deaths and over 20,000 injuries. Almost 6,000 buildings have reportedly collapsed in the country. From Syria, we have heard from the Syrian Ministry of Health has reported 769 deaths and 1,448 injuries due to the earthquake, and that is from Aleppo, Latakia, Hama, Idlib countryside, and Tartus. In terms of the response, you have all seen the very capable response that the Turkish authorities have mounted. They have a very strong organization, AFAD, working there. We're working very closely with them and through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. From OCHA's side, we are deploying two so-called UNDAC teams, that's UN Disaster Assessment and Coordination Teams. They are disaster assessment and response experts, the best in the world, that are being sent there. They are on the way. We're also coordinating the so-called Interact network, which is the international network for search and rescue teams. Again, these are national teams from around the world. They have been certified through a UN process so that they are capable of doing what they say they do, and they are on their way to Turkey as well. On the Syrian side, it is, of course, a different situation. We all know that it's a country that has been in conflict for over a decade. But the silver lining, if you like, on that is that there's a very robust UN presence and a very robust humanitarian presence. And of course, the humanitarian imperative to save lives through all means and all channels possible must prevail now. All politics aside, it's about saving lives today. So I will stop there and hand over.
Indeed, very much so, Jens. Thank you very much. The Office of the Special Envoy for Syria has a brief announcement too. Jennifer, and then.
Good morning. The UN Special Envoy is deeply saddened by the tragic loss of life and massive destruction from the earthquakes affecting thousands in Turkey and Syria, men, women, children, and the elderly in the middle of winter. Mr. Gero Pedersen sends deepest condolences to those affected, many who have already suffered enormously for many years. The Office of the Special Envoy for Syria is fully engaged in solidarity and support. Mr. Pedersen reiterates the Secretary General's call on the international community to help thousands suffering from loss. Syrians urgently need global assistance, and Mr. Pedersen encourages all to lend their support. I'll keep it brief so we can hear from everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. And and I'll go now to UNHCR. Just for the journalists here and online, the colleagues stay in the room so they will be able to answer your question once we've finished briefing. So now I'd like to give the floor to Matthew Salmarsh for the UNHCR. Matthew, you have with you Philippe Leclerc, who is on Zoom from Ankara. And so I don't know if you want to start, and then we give the floor to
Thanks, Alessandra. Just very briefly to introduce Philippe, he's our representative in Turkey. As everyone knows, Turkey is the largest host of refugees in the world. Philippe will give a brief introduction about our response in that country, and then if there are further questions later, I can take those about Syria. Thanks.
Philippe, bonjour.
Bonjour. Thank you, colleagues, for listening to us in Turkey. As Jens has mentioned, the situation is tragic, and we are witnessing it every day on the ground in the 10 provinces which are affected by the earthquakes. As a optimistic note, in addition to the figures that Jens has provided, I would like to mention the 8,000 people that were rescued by the search and rescue teams that are operating under the leadership of AFAD, the Emergency Disaster Turkish agency, who is intervening in 10 provinces and has extensive support to be provided and will be reinforced by the OCHA team, as well as many countries who are coming in to provide assistance. We are witnessing, again, the disastrous effect of it on the lives of families, be they Turkish, of course, because these 10 regions are also hosting the largest refugee population in the world. More than 1.7 million of the 15 million people inhabiting these 10 provinces are Syrian refugees. And in some of these provinces, Kilis, for example, 1 out of 2 persons is a refugee. Gaziantep, Shandufa, Hatay, 1 out of 5 or 4 are also refugees. So we have made our capacity of the UNHCR and other UN agencies available to the Turkish government, led by AFAD, IOM, WFP, UNDP, UNICEF, UNFPA, and so many other agencies are working around the clock to support the leading efforts of AFAD. Again, as we speak, the search and rescue efforts are the most important efforts that need to be carried on, so that more than 8,000 people can be rescued all over the 10 provinces. Right now, UNHCR is providing with other UN agencies what the Turkish authorities are requesting. So basically, kitchen sets, mattresses, tents, so that we can complement the leading effort of the Turkish authorities to rescue Turkish citizens, refugees in the same manner. And what we appreciate, as always, with the Turkish authorities is that no difference is made between any person. It's a humanitarian effort, a humanitarian inclusive policy that has been led by Turkey for more than 12 years. And Syrian, Turkish, whoever is a victim, is similarly treated.
Thank you very much, Philippe. Thanks for this update. The journalists are asking, since everybody is giving quite a lot of numbers, if it's possible, while we are having the briefing, for everybody to send the notes, either to the journalists directly or through our office to Solange and Elisa, and they will distribute it while we are online. Would you like to add anything, Mark? No, it's okay. So let's stay with the refugees issues related to the earthquake. And we have online our colleague Tamara Al-Rifai, who is, as you know, working on communication for UNRWA, who also has an update on the Palestinian refugees affected by the earthquakes. Tamara. Tamara, you have to unmute yourself. We do it on our side, but you have to do it also on yours.
Okay, now done. Thank you. Good morning, colleagues. Thank you so much for including UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. There are around 438,000 Palestinian refugees still living across 12 Palestine refugee camps in Syria. These are the camps and the refugees that are mostly accessible from Damascus. There are many more living in areas that are accessible through Turkey. So any call we're making is a call to support all Palestine refugees accessible from all parts. Today, UNRWA has confirmed reports of 6 Palestine refugees killed in the earthquake. This is information also accessible from Damascus. Four of these 6 refugees are members of the same family. It's a mother, a father, a son, and a daughter. They were all killed in Latakia on the Syrian coast in a camp for Palestine refugees there. There are 2 little girls killed in a Nayrab camp near Aleppo. They both went to UNRWA schools. Incidentally, I was in Nayrab 2 weeks ago. The situation was already extremely dire, as is the situation around Aleppo generally, so it's just unfathomable the level of hardship that that part of the country is undergoing now with the earthquake. We can expect the numbers of fatalities to continue increasing as the search and rescue operations advance. Last night, 700 Palestinian refugees slept in UNRWA facilities, including schools in Latakia. This is generally a standard thing where UNRWA schools become a refuge because they are designed and built generally to overcome shocks, even though the shock from yesterday was immense. So speaking of people who sought refuge and who lost their homes, the most urgent needs right now are medical supplies and items such as mattresses, blankets, and hygiene items, especially for women and girls. Another huge need is a need to mitigate, prevent gender-based violence in places where displaced people gather and where there are crowds. This is something that's also standard in such situations. So UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, is now seeking to respond to the needs of about 57,000 Palestine refugees in areas that are accessible from Damascus. And for this, we are seeking $2.7 million urgently. I will send all these figures right now to my colleagues in Geneva. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tamara. Yes, and that would be really very useful. So you have spoken about children, and we have James Helder here for UNICEF, who also has an update on the dire situation of children in this region. James.
Thanks, Hassan. Nor I. Shall we do that again?
Sorry for that. Nobody realized. Thanks for those who have put it in the chat. He is on.
The room
You have
seemed,
to start
the
again.
room
Sorry.
seemed happy. My apologies. Yeah, this came, of course, at the worst possible time for many, many vulnerable children in those areas who are already in need of humanitarian support. They went to bed as normal. They were woken by the screams of their neighbours, by breaking glass, and by that terrifying sound of crumbling concrete. It was already an emergency situation across northwest Syria, where 4 million people receive humanitarian support. Communities there are grappling with a cholera outbreak, a brutal winter, and of course, ongoing conflict. So if you say those slowly, many, many children in that part of the world in northwest Syria are facing a cholera outbreak, a brutal winter, and a vicious conflict. This earthquake, of course, is simply unimaginable hell for them. Now, 24 hours in terms of UNICEF response. Syria, it's about ensuring families have access immediately to safe water. Sanitation and safe water, of course, fundamental and life-saving at this point. Child protection, it's about separated and unaccompanied children and getting them back to their families, and psychological first aid. This is very traumatic for children who have survived. Education still becomes a priority, getting kids back into a classroom, give them some sense of normalcy amid the chaos. Medical supplies. There are few medical supplies and trauma kits in Damascus. UNICEF is filling immediate gaps for supplies via our warehouses in both Jordan and Lebanon. We've already sent emergency supplies for operating theatres in hospitals, along with nutrition supplies such as high-energy biscuits. In Turkey, whilst efforts, of course, focus on search and rescue, the wider humanitarian response from UNICEF will be hygiene kits, blankets, nutrition, things like winter clothes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. I remind colleagues that Margaret Harris for WHO is also online to answer your question on the health side. And before I open the floor to questions, I'd like to give the floor to Tommaso Della Lunga. As you know, Tommaso is the spokesperson of the president of the IFRC. And Tommaso is with us with 2 colleagues from the field, Ruben Kano, who's on Zoom from Ankara, and who is the IFRC heads of delegation in Turkey, and hopefully Mats Brinch Hansen on Zoom from Damascus, hoping that he has the mic which is working, and he's the head of delegation of FRC in Syria. Thomas, you want to start?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Alessandra. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like, on the behalf of the IFRC, to renew the condolences and the solidarity to the community affected by this terrible earthquake in Turkey and in Syria. Our delegation, the IFRC has already 2 delegations in Turkey and Syria. You will listen, as Alessandra just said, our colleagues from the field. What I would like to add is that yesterday, as you probably already aware, we launched the preliminary emergency appeal for 70 million Swiss francs for the 2 countries. But during the night and today early morning, after several new assessments, and given the fact that the situation and the needs are growing and the situation is evolving fast, we will go up to 200 million Swiss francs. And we will send an updated press release by today, to be much more precise in terms of the figures and the activities that we will do. So without taking much of your time, I would give the floor to Ruben Kano, our head of delegation in Turkey. Ruben, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, everyone from Turkey. I think I will not repeat the figures of the impact. Maybe to say that as 6,000 buildings probably are damaged or collapsed, that means that we are estimating at least 250,000 people that are homeless. So our priority for the next phase is mostly on the provision of shelter in the form of winter family tents, heaters, blankets, tarpaulins, sleeping bags, etc. As you know, people are not able to come back to the buildings. It will take several days, if not weeks, for the authorities to check the quality of the buildings and allowing people to go back in. So right after the rescue efforts that are underway, the next priority is providing shelter. As everybody knows, the winter conditions are very harsh in the area with temperatures below 0. So that is our key activity, while we are now doing the food provision and providing psychological support to the many traumatized people in the area. as this will be complemented probably with cash distributions. We are already distributing now cash to 1.6 million refugees in Syria, from Syria, sorry. And the idea is to complement this provision of shelter and food probably with cash, so people affected can cover all the other needs that maybe we are not able to understand or are different from family to family. I think, Tommaso, I leave it there with the overwhelming needs and the need to provide immediate shelter, food, and basic needs to probably more than 250.
Thank you very much, Ruben. Let's see if Mr. Hansen has made it through the wires. Can you try and take the floor, Mats Rinch?
Yeah, absolutely.
It works.
Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead, please, sir. Thank you.
Okay, you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Well, since the early morning yesterday, the Syrian Red Crescent staff and volunteers have responded tirelessly to the earthquake in areas where humanitarian needs are already very high after 12 years of crisis. We're witnessing major infrastructural damage in Aleppo, Latakia, and Hama and Tartus governorates, both in major cities, but also in the countryside. The extent of these damages is still being assessed as we speak. But these are areas, and we have to understand this, these are areas that are already damaged by war, with very vulnerable populations that only, to a very limited extent, have resilience to withstand an emergency of this scale. The local economy is plummeting. The capacity of all public services sectors, including health, civil defense, as well as resources in the country, are very, very limited to tackle this emergency. The government, civil defense, and health services and health infrastructure are overwhelmed, and the whole situation is exacerbated by increasing shortage of electricity, fuel, rising inflation, limited access to
Mr. Hansen, I'm sorry. Mr. Hansen, sorry, I have to interrupt you because you're coming all broken and we can't understand what you're saying. Tommaso has your notes. If it's okay with you, he will just read them for the journalists, and then we will try to see if we can get you to answer some questions. I'm very sorry, but we can't hear what you're saying. So maybe, Tommaso, you want to say a few about the situation in Syria for IFRC?
Yeah, absolutely. I will circulate the speech later on. So you will get it. Mainly what Mats was saying is that we are witnessing major infrastructure damage in Aleppo, Latakia, Hama, and Tartus governorates in major cities, but also in the countryside. The extent of the damages is now currently being assessed. These areas damaged by war and with a very vulnerable population that has only very limited resilience to withstand an emergency of this scale. The local economy is plummeting, and the capacity of all public services and sector, including health and civil defense, as well as the resources in country, are limited to tackle such a large-scale emergency. The government, civil defense, and health services and health infrastructure are overwhelmed, and the whole situation is exacerbated by increasing shortages in electricity, fuel, rising inflation, skyrocketing prices, and limited access to almost all public services. The latest figures are that 175 buildings have collapsed in Aleppo, Latakia, and Hama. 1,509 have died and 3,548 have been wounded. Alone in Hama and Latakia, hundreds are still unaccounted for. These numbers are expected to rise dramatically over the next 24 hours. Current assessments are that at least 4,000 families have lost their homes and 5,000 families are in need of immediate support. Many of them will be in need of long-term support as they have lost their homes, their possessions, and their livelihood opportunities. Our own Red Cross Crescent infrastructure are also been impacted. Our health clinic in Hama, our warehouses in Latakia and Tartus, and various branch infrastructure have been damaged, and our mobile health units are struggling to access the population in need. The current response: the Syrian Arab Red Crescent has been the first responder since early morning yesterday. Search and rescue team are working on the ground. Life-saving support and emergency medical care is being provided together with ambulance services. Transport of wounded is being done to health facilities and referral to hospitals. They are taking care also of dead body management, food and water being provided, provision of shelter materials, and of course, the restoring family link activities for the many that have lost track of relatives. The government, with support of Syrian Arab Red Crescent, have opened 18 shelters in Aleppo, 4 in Homs, and 17 in Latakia, for a total of 39. These will not cover needs and efforts that are going to be long-term, as many homeless won't be able to return home or have means to rebuild their livelihoods in the next 12 months. Sorry, but we will, okay.
We will send
yeah, and just to highlight the difficulties at the moment, search and rescue efforts are currently hampered by the lack of heavy equipment to remove debris. The authorities have not enough machinery and machineries to be rented from the private sector. There is a severe lack of fuel all over Syria, and this has hampered operation of heavy machinery, transport of relief personnel, and emergency ambulance services. The electricity situation is catastrophic, and most of Syria has only a few hours of electricity a day. This is hampering the running of clinics and hospitals. The weather, as we all already said, is not on our side either. It is cold and rainy and in affected areas, and we are now working against time to get the money wounded out of the rubble. Humanitarian funds are scarce in the country and have been declining over the years and are certainly not matching the needs in the country at the moment. And as I already said, the IFRC activated first the emergency fund of 3 million yesterday, and then the emergency appeal that I already reported on. Thank you.
And as, because I've got a lot of messages on it, he will send the notes now. If you can send it to me, I can send it to all the journalists. So thank you very much. And as I said, Margaret is online. I know that WHO has already spoken publicly this morning, but Margaret is with us in case you have more questions on the health side. So thank you to all the colleagues who were briefed. I managed to put most of them on the podium. Jennifer is still in the room if there is any question for the OSCE for Syria. And I have a lot of requests for the floor, but I will start from the room. And I see Chris has a question, and then Gabriella.
Christophe, Agence France Presse. Can you give us a sense of what the situation is for the refugees? Because they're probably even worse off than all the other people. So you were saying, I think, that in one of the regions, practically half of the population is refugees. So can you give us a sense of how they live? Are they in camps? Are they living in houses? What's the situation in the camps? I heard that there were also buildings that kind of collapsed. And so if you can give us as much information as possible on that, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Matt, you want to let Philippe answer? Or
Philippe go first.
Yeah, okay. Philippe, did you hear the question from our correspondent?
Yes, I did.
Go ahead then.
I will respond in English. Yes, the situation of refugees, as I said, is they are affected as the Turkish population is. What I highlighted is the way the Turkish authorities and the Turkish state has been including refugees in their policies. So only 2% of the total population of refugees, Syrians, which are more than 3.5 million as we speak in the whole of the country, and 1.7 million in the 10 provinces which have been affected by the earthquake. So they are living side by side with Turkish citizens in the same buildings which have collapsed. They are participating to the rescue as volunteers under the coordination of AFAD. So it's not that there's a difference between refugees and Turkish citizens. They are living and affected in the same way. There are only 47,000 refugees who are in temporary accommodation centers throughout the 7 camps in these provinces. And actually these camps may be used as a place where earthquake victims will be transferred to, as there's a high need of supporting displaced persons because of the buildings being affected, as my colleague Ruben Cano was mentioning from IFRC. So we do not see at this stage any difference in response and even of needs between the refugees and the Turkish people. And this is why we are supporting the Turkish authorities to respond to both as we speak in the various provinces I described.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
And maybe just to add from the sort of regional perspective, obviously this is an absolute hammer blow for Syria's displaced populations. The refugees and those who have been displaced within Syria itself are already suffering from an economic crisis. We're in the depths of winter. We've been seeing snowstorms. And of course, you know, the war has been going on for over a decade. Within Syria itself, as you probably know, there are almost 7 million people internally displaced. There's a huge need for humanitarian support and assistance in the northwest part of Syria. There's 4.1 million people who require that assistance, the majority of whom, of course, are women and children. So in terms of UNHCR's response in the country, we've been mobilizing our staff and our stockpiles from our country offices and our regional offices to get much needed support to the field, to the areas that have been hammered by this earthquake. Primarily, initially, that's in the areas we've heard about around Aleppo, Hama, Latakia, and Idlib. And that's initially going out with what we call non-food items and core relief items. These are blankets, winter clothes, shelters, tents, cooking items, and so on. So that's the immediate response, but obviously that will develop as the days go on.
Thank you very much, Matt. And also in the room, Gabriela, Reuters.
Good morning. A question about Turkey's rescue efforts. The WHO has said there are some silent areas of the country where there hasn't been any information emerging. I'm just wondering, what kind of obstacles do you see to getting the help to the areas that have been damaged, especially in Turkey, where it seems to there seems to be poor communications and lacking airlift capacity to be able to deliver that aid. What is missing from the rescue effort? Thank you.
Maybe Jens, you want to take this one? And sorry, colleagues, it's a little bit difficult to know to who wants to answer the question. So those colleagues who are briefing, just raise your hand if you want to add anything. Jens.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the question. I can say what we are doing to support that effort. And as I think I mentioned, the first effort is really search and rescue. There's a window of about 7 days. That's what experience tells us where we'll find live survivors. It can happen later, but it's really, really critical that these teams get out there as soon as possible. So in support of the national response, 12 international teams have arrived. Already, international search and rescue teams. We expect another 27 teams to arrive in the course of today and tomorrow. The key challenges that we get reports back on is about the access by road. It's simply, as we heard, a hammer blow, a sledgehammer, buildings pancaked, roads destroyed. It is a disaster zone if I ever saw one. So, of course, access by road is a challenge. There is a shortage of trucks to transport international teams to work sites. That's another one. AFAD, the Turkish emergency authorities, they are looking at alternatives. They're looking at helicopters. They're looking at mobilizing trucks from other provinces outside of the disaster zone. So every effort is being done to overcome these logistical hurdles which are created by the earthquake itself.
Thank you, Jens. And we have just sent you the notes of IFRC Syria. Yeah, Paula.
Hi, good morning. Paula Dupré-Lebias from Geneva Solutions. I actually wanted to get a sense of, like, do you have a global number in terms of the funds that are required for the response? IFRC mentioned some numbers, but I'm just wondering if amongst all the agencies, if there's a sense of how much is really needed, and then regarding the dynamics of funding. I mean, it has been difficult till now to get funding for response in this, especially in northern Syria. But I'm wondering if you're seeing, any sort of politicization in any way of the money that's coming in for response in these various areas.
I guess the issue is still, sorry, that we are in an assessment time, but Jens, I don't think we have a cumulative figure, but if other colleagues want to answer this question.
Yeah, sure. It's a good question. It's a natural question. It's one of the first questions we ask ourselves because we know when we start, there's no money there, and we have to raise the funds pretty much as we go along. It's always like that, unfortunately. I think I would say watch the space, because we will hear from our colleagues when assessments have been done, the discussions with the authorities, all the rest of that needs to play out first, and then we will hear for sure how much it's going to cost and how much solidarity we'll need from the international community. On the second question, I think it's not wise of me to start speculating about what donors will do and won't do. I'll just repeat what I said at the beginning. It is imperative that everybody sees this as the humanitarian for what it is, a humanitarian crisis where lives are at stake. Please, don't politicize any of this. Let's get the aid out to the people who so desperately need it.
Which was also the call of the Secretary General yesterday, who said he counts on the international community, the whole international community, to help these families in a situation which was already tragic before this event. Ben.
Benjamin Bissert, TS Radio. Does any one of you already have an assessment regarding the sanitation system in terms of the cholera outbreak? Any targeted plans?
I don't know if, Margaret, you want to say something about that, and other colleagues?
I'm sorry, I was just catching. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, it's about the question of sanitation. If you have already an assessment of what the sanitation needs are, and if anybody else also want to add, please don't hesitate. Also, Philippa in the field, just raise your hand. Margaret.
Yes, we have not had time to do an assessment, but certainly with massive interruption to infrastructure, we know that the critical thing is, as James mentioned earlier, is getting clean water and advising people to boil their water or use bottled water, not to use contaminated water, because there is a big risk of cholera and other waterborne diseases if you do not use clean water sources.
Thank you very much. So I think we don't have any more questions from the room, so let's go to the platform. There are many questions here, and I'll start with Yuri for Janovosti. Yuri.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I have a question about the cross-border between Turkey and Syria. It seems that the UN, some reports told that the UN stopped the deliveries of humanitarian aid due to the state of the roads. Is that the fact that the UN stopped this delivery, and for how long?
Yeah, thank you. What I can say is that the operation, the cross-border operation, has itself been impacted. Mind you, this has, of course, tragically impacted so many people, including our own staff. Our own contracting partners, the truck drivers that we work with, our national staff, they're looking for their families in the rubble. So we are as impacted as everyone else. That has had an impact on that operation. In the immediate, of course, the Security Council has recently renewed that, and we will continue. We will use any and all means to get aid to people, and that includes the cross-border operation and the cross-line operation from inside Syria. Any available means. What we actually hear from our implementing partners in the Northwest is that they are operational and they are asking for supplies, and they are also asking for funding. The cross-border humanitarian fund, which is a main instrument to procure relief that goes into the Northwest, is currently at 0. So it needs to be replenished urgently so that all those willing and able to help inside the disaster zone can do so.
Thank you very much. Jens, Katrine.
Yes, thank you. A couple questions. I have so many. My first question is to Alessandra. Is the Secretary General planning to go to the region, to fly to the region? I let you answer to it after. I read already what has been said in the messages, so I would like to have something that is not written in the messages that have been sent by New York and said yesterday by the spokesperson. Jens, could you please be nice enough to send us the notes about different figures you mentioned this morning? You spoke about 3,200 deaths, if I'm not mistaken, and about the road access that has been mentioned between Turkey and Syria. What I've heard on TV on several channels is that there was a problem of access, and that in fact, most of the rescue teams had to use the same mountain road that was also used by local people, and that it was a problem. Of course, they could not access quickly and easily. And one of the gentlemen spoke also about the lack of machineries. I think it was Tommaso. So how many cranes are needed, and also in Syria, what kind of machineries are needed? Is it easy to bring it over? And my last question is ITU. I know that ITU has an emergency telecommunication disaster plan. And we're talking about problems of telecommunication. Is there anyone of ITU able to tell us if they are on the field?
It so happens that David is here, so I'll give him the floor in a moment. There are many, many questions that you've asked, Catherine, so let's take it one by one. What I can tell you about the Secretary General is this question has been asked to Stéphane Dujarric, to the spokesperson. He said that really our efforts today are focused on the assessment of the humanitarian operation. So he specifically said that we are all following this. The Secretary General first, he is paying very close attention, and he'll do whatever he can to raise the profile of this crisis. For the moment, we don't have an announcement about the trip, but we are looking into all ways that we can have, the Secretary General can have, to support the response to these operations. On the, okay, I don't know where to start. Who would like to, maybe Jens or Tommaso or David, just whoever wants to go.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Catherine, what the question was about the cross-border operation. I think I think I've said that yes, we can say that there are logistical issues because of the destruction that has been caused by the earthquake, but I don't have much more than that at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommaso. You want to add something about this issue of the machines?
Yeah, thanks, Catherine, for the question. Actually, I don't have at this moment any other detail. Of course, the situation is very complex, and we are still assessing it. The point is that the lack of heavy machinery, of course, is a critical problem to remove debris and do all the other stuff that is needed in this kind of situation.
David, anything on ITU?
Sure, thank you very much. And thank you for the question in recognition of the importance of telecommunications, particularly emergency telecommunications when disaster strikes. I can say that ITU does have regional presences for offices that cover Europe and the Arab states. I can say that the ITU Secretary General and other leaders have obviously expressed their support and sympathy for the people in the affected areas. ITU does operate an emergency telecommunications roster that can be deployed upon the request of member states that are affected. So that is, for the moment, where ITU stands as far as its offer of support and sympathy and equipment as it relates to emergency telecommunications.
Catherine, you have a follow-up? You have to unmute
Thank
yourself.
you. Yes, I mean, I was not unmuted. Thank you, Alessandra, for giving me the floor back. David, my question is that I know what you have as system, but as the president of Turkey did ask the support of the international community, I mean, did not ITU automatically deploy the system, because he did ask the help of the international community, and we know it's vital to be able to communicate.
So I will go back and check on the status of the offer of support and the requests that have come in, and report that back to the systems. And that emergency telecommunications roster would include the deployment of emergency telecommunications systems that can be then used in the country, deployed in the country as the government see fit upon a request.
Please go back to all the journalists. I'm pretty sure this is something that interests everyone. Many more questions. And again, all the colleagues online, just raise your virtual hand if you want to answer some of the questions. It's very hard to see everybody. Imogen, BBC.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. It's back to the access. Would it be helpful that for you to, because there used to be more than one border crossing from Turkey into Syria, would it be helpful now? Would you ask the Security Council to open up more, particularly if you need to get this heavy equipment across in a hurry? And second, Jens, you said there was a fund that was at zero. What exactly does that pay for? Is that for staff working, or is it for supplies? You said this cross-border humanitarian fund. So two questions there. Sorry, I know that's probably one too many, but
yeah, no, it's a legitimate question, Imogen, and definitely I'm pretty sure our colleagues will look into it. But the thing is that at this very point, we just have one border crossing, and we'll try to get as much aid as possible through that one crossing. We'll take it one step at a time. But yes, it's a valid point. I give the floor to Jens on the second part of the question.
Yes, thank you, Imogen. So the fund that needs replenishment is the Syria Cross-Border Humanitarian Fund. It's what we call a pooled fund. So it's a multi-donor fund where we can release funding from more freely or unearmarked, if you like. So the donors put their money in there, and then they pretty much leave it to us to make the allocations. Now, this fund goes to pay for relief items that are requested by agencies that are part of the cross-border operation. So those are the big UN agencies, first and foremost, but also, if I am not mistaken, international NGOs.
Thank you. Next is John Zarokostas.
Yes, good morning. James, I was wondering if you can give us, if you have any provisional estimates by UNICEF on number of children killed and injured across the affected regions in both Turkey and Syria. And also, do you have any information, any of the people on the podium, whether the sanctions that have been in place against Syria have been lifted across the board for the humanitarian assistance to go in, because there's a very complex process of getting the supplies in through the exemptions to the sanctions. That's also very important. And thirdly, if Iranian experts are participating, they have a very good reputation and did a textbook performance in the Bam earthquake in 2003. So that's for Jens, if Iranian earthquake specialists are deployed as well. Thank you.
Let's start with G.
Obviously, speculating on child deaths is distressing, but when we hear the official numbers, UNICEF fears that the earthquakes that hit southeast Turkey and northern Syria early yesterday morning may have killed thousands of children.
Okay, on the sanctions, I don't think anybody has anything. I'm looking to my colleagues. So Jens, maybe on the third question.
Yeah, if I understood the question correctly, it was about the search and rescue teams that were coming in. If anyone from Iran, no, as of yesterday, I do not have confirmed participation of Iran. That doesn't mean that it can't be one of the 27 that I mentioned that we expect in addition coming in today and tomorrow.
Thank you, Nick. New York Times.
Yeah, thank you. Question for Jens. Again, I'm afraid I'm coming back to cross-border. I'm just unclear what has or hasn't been sent, or whether it has been, what you've been able to send so far. And if you're not sending, is that primarily a result of the disruption to your operations from the quake, or from the lack of funding, or because of the access issues with damage to roads? And if there isn't much cross-border aid going, is it fair to say at this point that the main source of assistance to the 4.1 million people in the Northwest is coming essentially from within the country, from Damascus? Thank you.
We are just a little over 24 hours into this emergency. As I mentioned, the effect of the quake itself has also hit the cross-border operation in terms of both the physical infrastructure and critically in terms of the people who work there and the people who drive these trucks. So I would not jump to any conclusion at this point. It is also the case that agencies have stockpiles inside the area, inside Northwest Syria. And we know that, of course, they are looking at releasing relief items from those stockpiles. And as I mentioned, we have operational partner agencies that we work with inside who can help us with the distribution of that.
Absolutely. Nabil.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry for our colleagues on the field. Al Arabiya. Sorry, Nabil.
Thank you, Nabil Abissab, Al Arabi TV station. Also about the cross-border mechanism. Can I don't know? Can foreign rescue teams cross the border? If you can tell us about that, maybe the procedure on this point. Can NGOs, foreign NGOs, or foreign teams in general cross the border to northern Syria from Turkey? And is the UN the only coordinator in this region? Are you receiving requests from European countries or NGOs to be part of the rescue effort? Thank you.
Jens, and maybe then Tommaso.
Yeah, the cross-border operation is governed by resolutions made in the Security Council. And you're all aware of that. And you're also aware that it's not my mandate to speak about the Security Council and what happens there. They make their decisions. We have as I mentioned, an extension of the cross-border operation. That's welcome. That remains in place. What I can say is that we need all modalities to be used to get aid in cross-border, cross-line to people as fast as possible. Yeah.
Tommaso?
Well, I could just add a couple of things. First, that of course we would strongly welcome any possible mean to bring humanitarian aid and humanitarian support to all the people affected by the earthquake in both countries. Regarding the questions about international rescue team, if I understood well, In the case, at least in our case, in the case of the IFRC, we rely on our national societies. So in this case, on the Syrian Arab Red Crescent. So our international delegates are based in Damascus and are entering through Damascus, the country. Then on the other side, of course, we are working with the Turkish Red Crescent, and our delegation is based in Ankara. And of course, it's Turkey. Turkey, it's a completely different environment, and if you want, logistically wise, much more easy.
Thank you. Nabil, you have a follow-up?
Yes, please. So you mentioned that you have stockpiles stored in northern Syria, but I'm sure you will also need equipment, trucks, etc., to maybe to do the search and rescue operations. So do you have such equipments now? Do you expect them to arrive from somewhere, either from Damascus or from Turkey? What's happening? Who's doing, I mean, or what are you using for these operations?
Let Jens and maybe then also Matt has something on the UNHCR.
Yeah,
Jens.
just quickly, what I can say, I mentioned the so-called INSARAC network of international search and rescue teams that is available to all countries in the world. So it is open to, of course, to go to Turkey, but also to Syria.
Matt, and then Margaret has also something on that. Matt.
Just in terms of the cross-border side, nothing to add to what Jens has said, although obviously we stand ready to participate in any planned interagency cross-line missions if and when it's possible to do that. In terms of stockpiles in country, as I mentioned earlier, this is in Syria, we have been, we do have stocks in country, and we have been mobilizing them. We have 30,000 core relief items, kits. Those are spread between Aleppo, Homs, and Tartus. And we have 20,000 tents that are available in Damascus. So those can be deployed internally as soon as is possible. In addition, perhaps we can update just briefly on the funding side. At the moment, we're examining the possibility of launching a separate appeal, but at the moment, as we've heard from all these colleagues, needs assessments are still being carried out. But in the meantime, of course, we do have a Turkey appeal and we have a Syria appeal for this year. The Turkey appeal is for $348 million. That's currently 11% funded for UNHCR. And the Syria appeal is for $465 million, and that's currently 7% funded.
Incredibly underfunded. Margaret, you also had something to add.
Yes, I just wanted to say we've actually been able to move trauma and surgical kits cross-border from our Gaziantep office, or via our Gaziantep office, because we had pre-positioned supplies, and we've been able to supply 16 hospitals in Syria, in the affected areas in Syria, as of yesterday. That's the information I have.
Thank you. I see Catherine has a follow-up.
Thank you, Alessandra. Yes, Matthew, could you be kind enough, please, to send your notes? Mr. Leclerc spoke about, if I'm not mistaken, 8,000 rescued people. Is it globally between Turkey and Syria, or is it only in one country? And could Tamara Al-Rifai also send her notes, please, UNRWA? And she spoke also about 12 camps in Syria that had been affected. So could she tell us how many people are living in these 12 camps, if I'm not mistaken? So it would be really nice to get the notes, please. That would be very helpful.
Okay, let's start with Matt.
We will certainly send you through the notes, particularly of what Philippe said earlier on. In terms of that number of 8,000, I'll have to double check that and get back to you, but notes should be forthcoming in the next half hour or so.
Yeah, because I see Philippe is not with us now. Yeah, so Tamara, you are on.
Thanks. There are 12 camps total for Palestine refugees across Syria. Some of them are in the affected areas. So, for example, the Latakia camp and 2 camps in Aleppo, in Nairab and Ain al-Tel, both of them in the Aleppo countryside, are in the affected area. So the 12 are the total. That includes other camps in the south of Syria, that include the famous Yarmouk camp. That's the total camps across Syria for Palestine refugees. But for the area affected, we are looking at 57,000 Palestine refugees who have been impacted because they live in the camps that are in the north.
And Tamara, please send us your note. We will
Yes.
distribute them to the journalists.
Yes, done.
Thank you. Catherine?
Maybe I could connect directly with Tamara, if possible, instead to ask all my questions during the briefing. So Tamara, I'm France 24, so I will send you my email through the chat, and maybe we could connect. And I would like also to be connected with Philippe Leclerc, if possible. Thank you.
Tamara has put her email directly into the chat. So if you want to reach out to her, please do so. And maybe Matt, you could do the same thing for Philip. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, we still have questions for colleagues. And I see Yuri has another question.
Yes, sorry, good morning one more time. My question is for James from UNICEF, if he has any details about the potential thousands of children killed, and if he can send his notes ASAP, because it's really shocking cipher.
My notes have been sent. I'm not sure on your first question.
If you have any details on the children killed.
Oh, any details on the again, I don't really understand what you mean by details on those children killed.
I mean, how many of them? Because only what I have is that thousands. And if you have any idea of...
Okay, sorry, understood. Yeah, as mentioned to John, I mean, the speculating is perilous, but if we look at the numbers that Jens and Ocha have shared, more than 5,000 people have died. If we look at yesterday, WHO saying we may see fatalities rise 8-fold, then UNICEF's fear at present, no one has exact numbers to break down of women or children or men. If at present, though, our fear is that thousands of children may have died.
Thank you very much. And maybe just to add, there was a question before on the issue of sanctions, why we don't have a specific answer on the situation at the moment. What we can say is that any humanitarian effects of sanctions that could exacerbate the plight of ordinary Syrians need to be avoided and mitigated, in particular in terms of overcompliance. I don't see any other hand up. Is there anyone in the room? No? Okay. So if this is the case, I would like to thank all the colleagues who have extensively briefed us on the situation in these 2 countries impacted by the earthquake. Thanks also to the speakers who were online. Yes, please, those who have not yet sent out the notes, do so. I just have a couple of more quick announcements for you, including one from the Human Rights Council. Rolando asks me to inform you, and we stay with Syria, that the Commission of Inquiry on the Syrian Arab Republic issued a press release this morning expressing its deepest condolences to all people in Syria and Turkey affected by the devastating earthquakes, and reiterated its call for a comprehensive ceasefire in Syria to enable optimal rescue and relief efforts. The Commission also urged the international community to act rapidly to provide humanitarian aid and support, and calls on all parties to provide immediate and unfettered humanitarian access to all areas affected by the earthquakes to provide life-saving assistance. I think you have received this release, but just in case, let us know if you need it. On also human rights, the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, which opened, as we said last week, its 84th session yesterday at the Palais, is reviewing today the report of Hungary And this afternoon at 3 p.m., the Conference on Disarmament will hold a public plenary still under the presidency of Egypt. This is what I had for you. John, you have a question?
Yes, good morning again, Alessandra. I was wondering if Habitat have a representative office in Geneva, and if they've come up with any information with relation to reinforcing buildings in seismic areas or areas at risk of earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. It's a precautionary principle, but given the calamity, I was wondering if they're looking into guidance for possibly down the road for people to reinforce their buildings, which is a must.
John, we have a liaison office of UN Habitat here. I don't know if he has already spoken to you. The chief ad interim of the Habitat Geneva office is Graham Alabaster. I can put the email in the chat for you all if you want to write to him about this issue. I'll do it straight away so you have it before the end of the briefing. And here it goes. So hopefully you can go straight to Graham for this question. He's not a communication person, he's the chief ad interim of the office, but I'm sure he will be able to help. Okay, so is there any other question? I don't see any up on the line either. So thank you very much. We will continue to update you on the situation in this region, of course. And thanks for everyone for having contributed to this briefing. Have a nice afternoon.
Recording stopped.